In this video, we're going to look at UFC Vegas 72. I'll give you my predictions. We'll go through the entire card. Make sure you strap in. There's a lot for us to discuss. As always, you can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. Bruno Silva and Sergey Pavlovich absolutely saved our bacon last week when it came to betting and DFS, so thank you, gentlemen.
No problemo.
We have a short card in the Apex this week. I don't want to waste another second of your time. We can get right into the action. Our main event this weekend is an interesting clash of styles when you got Song Yadong, powerful striker, he's got fast, accurate hands, while Ricky Simón is the best wrestler in the division.
A bold claim.
And I have a hard lean on this one because one, with a striker versus grappler matchup, we typically lean one way, not every time, but we typically lean toward the grappler. And on top of that, I have never bet against Ricky Simón. The man is a problem. He's 8-2 in the UFC. He has wins over guys like Marab, Montel Jackson, and most recently the destruction of Jack Shore that sent him out of the weight class. He's strong like bull and he can change levels with the best of them, and we've seen Song Yadong taken down in the past. This fight for Yadong reminds me a lot of his fight with Cody Stamann, where he gave up a bunch of takedowns, he gave up over a round of control time, and he had a hard time getting his striking going. Ricky Simón is a dog on a bone when it comes to his wrestling, so he's not only going to try to get you down, but he's going to chain takedowns together, and he's not going to stop. Relentless pace, crazy pressure, and something like that in a 5-round atmosphere could be a lot to deal with. I expect Ricky Simón to get takedowns in every round and really force Song Yadong to work, because when you look at the takedown numbers from Ricky Simón, it's a lot of what you get with somebody like Marab, where you've got 2 takedowns, 6, 7, 7, 6, and he's getting a lot of takedowns, and that's because guys tend to be able to work their way back up to the feet, but that's a double-edged sword for his opponents because it takes a lot of energy for them to work back up from the mat, but once they do make it back up to their feet, they have to defend takedowns again, and that's really tough in a 3-round fight, let alone a 5-round fight. And the last thing I'll say about this is I expect Ricky Simón to not only get the takedowns, but later in this fight, I see him slapping on an arm triangle. When you got a guy that's that big and that strong, that's his best move. So give me the takedowns, give me the guy with more ways to win this fight, because I don't think that Ricky Simón is going to get completely smoked on the feet either. I think it'll be competitive. Give me the physical strength. Give me Ricky Simón to win this fight by submission. In our co-main event, we have another striker versus grappler matchup where we have Caio Borralho looking to move to 4-0 in the UFC against Oleksiejczuk, who throws more heat than Fire Mario. Mikey O at 185 pounds is a bad dude because he punches as hard as anybody in the division, and if this fight is fought at range for more than 2 minutes, I'm telling you now, Caio Borralho is going to be looking up at the ceiling. Oleksiejczuk has that stunning one-shot knockout power. Now, he does struggle to keep the feet. We've seen him out-grappled and finished quickly in the past, and that gives me pause here. Like even last time out against Cody Brundage, you look at it, you see the first round knockout, that's great, but he was taken down 3 times in the opening round by Cody Brundage with little to no resistance. He does a good job of getting back up to his feet, but my problem is him getting down there, because Caio Borralho does 2 things really well: wears a neck tat and also takes the back and doesn't let guys get back up. And during his fights, you always hear during the broadcast the connection to Damian Maia and things like that, but he's not a prolific finisher on the mat. However, his control is phenomenal. He sticks to guys like glue. He's like gum under your shoe. He's like peanut butter on the roof of a dog's mouth when he gets to his spot. But again, he's not really finishing guys even when he's in a dominant position on the mat, and Oleksiejczuk has sneaky physical strength and much higher level experience than Borralho overall. And I think there's a good chance that if Borralho goes on to win this fight, it's probably going to be boring, just like most of his recent fights. It's going to be 15 minutes of backpacking. Backpack. And that's because he prioritizes position over submission, which is nice for the win-loss column, not really nice for the people at home. But this could instead be a moment where he gets chin-checked by a legitimate knockout artist, and that's where I lean for this fight. Oleksiejczuk is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, underdogs on the card right now, and that's because of the big gap in the grappling, but the path to victory is far too clear, the kid is far too hot, and the line is far too wide. So give me the power, give me the better level of competition overall, and give me the guy who's looked more impressive in the UFC. The pick for me is Oleksiejczuk by knockout. For this next fight, initially I felt like the line is too wide, but the deeper that I look into this, especially considering the piece of evidence I'm going to share with you in a second, I think it's just right. Rodolfo Vieira is fighting Cody Brundage in this spot, and Rodolfo Vieira is an amazing grappler, one of, if not the most decorated BJJ players to come into the UFC. 7 of 8 wins by submission. He's finished all 3 of his UFC wins by submission, and when he gets his hands on you, you can cancel Christmas. Now on the feet, he looked like a fish out of water. water coming into the UFC, but last time out, he more than held his own against Chris Curtis on the feet. It was actually really impressive. He also showed off improved cardio last time out. He went 0 for 20 on takedown attempts, but you don't get to that many takedown attempts without trying, without working hard, and without having a good gas tank. On top of that, he's getting jabbed by Chris Curtis. Chris Curtis is digging him to the body, and he's still coming forward. So you really see Rodolfo Vieira coming into his own as a mixed martial artist, a guy who's been open about being a little nervous to get hit in there. He took some of Chris Curtis's best shots. He kept coming forward. He was pushing a pace, and I really liked what I saw out of him last time out, especially when you look at this matchup. On the other side, you have Cody Brundage, who seems like one of those guys who is forever slept on. In his 4 UFC fights, he's been the underdog every time, and this time is no different, but I do see why because of what the other side is bringing. Cody Brundage is a strong grappler with great hips, and he's got tons of power in his hands as well, and he's not afraid to let his hands go. That is a big plus for him in this fight. And I do think if he wins this fight, it's going to be by knockout, but I think the most likely outcome here is that Rodolfo Vieira wins by submission, because we've seen Cody Brundage not only go to his wrestling even when he's had success standing up, but the one image that I can't get out of my mind, and this is the piece of evidence that we were talking about before. In his last fight against Oleksiejczuk, he's on top, he gets reversed, and then he gets knocked out.
Oh, that bottom man, and now you're seeing he went to the body lock.
Oh no, he's out.
And that's important because he's the wrestler. He got the fight down to the mat on his terms, and then he let Oleksiejczuk, of all people, reverse position. That's crazy. And if you want to go a step further, you can look at Nick Maximov being able to out-grapple him and outwork him as well. If those guys are having success in any capacity on the ground, Rodolfo Vieira is going to rip your legs off. So I do like Rodolfo Vieira to win this fight. I do think he wins by submission, and I think he does it in the opening round. Give me round 1 sub for Rodolfo Vieira. Let's go. If you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, comment something for the algorithm, because when you comment, well, you know how the algorithm works. Those are all free ways to support the channel, and if you want to go a step further, you can visit kunithmma.com, create a profile, choose the plan that works best for you, and that's going to open up access to the official bets, all of the DFS strategy guides and tools, as well as the community that we have in there. Last week, people were posting on the community tab. I saw a couple of bets come through for the boys. I saw a couple of parlays come through for the boys, and it was nice to see. So go over, check it out, see if it's a good fit for you, and that is the best way to support the channel overall. Next, we're looking at a fight with Julian Erosa and Fernando Padilla. Fernando Padilla making his UFC debut. Interesting fight. Let's talk about it. It's good to see Juicy J back in action because he's a fun fighter every time, win, lose, or draw. And what you love from Julian Erosa is the crazy output. If you just look at some of these numbers here in his last 3 wins, you have 152, 163, 106. These are striking totals. In those same fights, 2 takedowns, 3 takedowns, 2 takedowns, and minutes of control time across these. So he's doing a good job of not only staying busy, but mixing in his grappling as well, showing that well-roundedness. And Julian Erosa's got that dog in him. He's always going to fight for your money. He's always going to fight hard, and he's not going to back down in the octagon, even if he's not having a ton of success. Now, on the other side, Fernando Padilla is again making his UFC debut, only 26 years old and out of action for nearly 2 years, which is an important piece that we're going to come back to in just a minute. Outside of the UFC, he's actually faced some decent competition, not only in the LFA, but he's also fought names that you would recognize, like Dan Ige, who's in the UFC, Derek Minner, who's fixing fights in the UFC, Spike Carlisle, who was in the UFC. He's got solid jiu-jitsu, but he does rely on it a little too much because the guy can't defend a takedown. What he does have going for him, however, is he's got good output on the feet, he's got that jiu-jitsu, and he's also got a very big frame for the division, standing at 6'1" with a 76-inch reach for featherweight. That's wild. And that length should serve him well here because we have seen Julian Erosa, who's very lengthy for the division himself, struggle with guys who can match his size. He got knocked out cold last time out against Bruce Leroy in the first round, and Bruce Leroy isn't doing that to anybody. If you comb through it, that was pretty much the first real knockout of Bruce Leroy's UFC career that has been 27, 26 fights long. He went to war with Steven Peterson. That was a split decision, could have went either way, and then Sung Woo Choi knocked him out. We know that Sung Woo Choi's not all that good, but he is long and rangy for the division. And at first I looked at this and thought, well, Juicy J, he's the veteran, he's going to put it on this kid who's making his debut, he might have those jitters. Terrible matchup. Regardless, it's a terrible matchup for Padilla. There are easier fights at 145 pounds to make your debut in than Julian Erosa. However, this does remind me a little bit of Natalia Silva and Jasmine Jasdavicius. Natalia Silva's real young, hasn't fought in a couple of years, makes her debut against somebody who has experience in the UFC, and she completely blanked her. We can talk about the poor takedown defense from Padilla, we could talk about the inactivity, we can talk about Julian Erosa's experience, but the reality is if he's only 26 years old and he hasn't fought in 2 years, we may have never even seen the version that he's going to come in like. He could be a completely different fighter than he was a couple of years ago. He could have gotten much better, and even then when we saw him, he was pretty damn good. And Julian Erosa is forever a guy who is going to be known as chinny. 5 of his 6 UFC losses have come by knockout. He's a guy who gets hit and he doesn't really take it all that well, especially if you're able to catch him in the first round. And I think the young guy is going to come in with a lot of piss and vinegar early. So if he takes it to Julian Erosa from the opening bell, I could see him catching him, knocking him out in the first round, or finding a submission sometime in the second round. But give me Fernando Padilla to win this fight inside the distance. Next, we're looking at a heavyweight fight where we have Waldo Cortes-Acosta fighting Marcos Rogerio de Lima. Lots of names going on, and it's only 2 guys fighting. Don't get confused. Waldo Cortes-Acosta is a lot younger. He's undefeated, and he's gotten off to a strong start in the UFC, going 2-0, at least strong in result. I don't know if I would consider his performances all that strong, but he is a boxer by trade, and he fights that way. There's no grappling to be seen, there's no leg kicks to be seen, and the power that he's shown on the regional scene, it hasn't really translated to the UFC. You do like the output for the weight class though, landing 147 significant strikes on Chase Sherman. However, my issue with that is you land 147 significant strikes at heavyweight and you're not getting at least a knockdown. That's like jumping in a swimming pool and not getting wet. Now he faces Pizao, and this is a big step up in competition for him because Pizao has never been knocked out in the UFC. He's only been knocked out once in his long career. He's got a serious chin and he's got big heavyweight power, not only in both hands but also in his leg kicks. We've seen Waldo Cortes-Acosta eat leg kicks, not really checking them, not moving out of range of them all that well, and Pizao's going to have a massive grappling advantage in this fight, and this guy's a finisher through and through, on top of being a big body. Those qualities make me think that he's going to win this fight. Now, my issue with him is that his cardio is trashish, it's garbigio, it's basura, and Waldo Cortes-Acosta has that great output and much better conditioning overall. So if we get halfway through the second round, or even into the third round, I could see Waldo really taking over. But Marcos Rogerio de Lima is finishing nearly 90% of his wins, and I don't see this fight going beyond the second round. I expect Pizao to come out hot, look for trip takedowns, look for throws against the cage, and I expect him to have good success on the feet as well. Waldo Cortes-Acosta, he throws a lot of strikes, but it's very basic technique. He tends to throw one hand a lot more than the other, and you're looking at a situation where a fighter this experienced has seen that thousands of times before. So I'm going to go with the experience, I'm going to go with the grappling upside, I'm going to go with the durability, the power of the veteran to hand Waldo Cortes-Acosta's first loss as a pro. Give me Pizao to win this fight inside the distance. Now for this next fight, I want to start by saying that the line makes no sense to me at all. We'll be looking at Martin Buday versus Jake Collier, and I don't know how Martin Buday is not a much bigger favorite here. He's a real heavyweight. He's a legit big dude. He's like the Mountain from Game of Thrones, while Jake Collier is more like Mountain Dew. Buday is a heavyweight fighting a heavyweight. Collier is a light heavyweight at best, just with way too much body fat. And I think that Martin Buday has him beat everywhere. I think he hits a lot harder. I think he's going to land a lot cleaner. And I think if he wants to, he can wear on Collier by pushing him up against the fence, making him carry his weight, getting on top of him, and just beating him up, really. We saw Chris Barnett outwork Jake Collier and finish him early in the second round, and Collier just gassed hard in that fight. I think this fight could look a lot like the Chris Barnett fight when he fought Martin Buday, where he got held up against the fence, he was getting kneed, he was getting elbowed, he was getting beaten up. And I think the same thing could happen to Jake Collier this week. And Jake Collier doesn't really have a ton of power to get respect on the feet from Martin Buday. The last time he knocked somebody out in the UFC was in 2016, and that was down at middleweight. And online, he's fighting out of a gym in Missouri called Pat Smith's Pit, which frankly sounds like a barbecue spot. So tell me in the comments if I'm missing something. I don't see how Martin Buday is not a minus 300 favorite. We're going to hammer him this week on the website, I assure you of that. The pick for me is Martin Buday to win this fight. I expect him to win by decision. Now I love this next fight here with Natan Levy and Pete Rodriguez. Natan Levy's a great grappler. You see 6 takedowns last time out against Gerardo Valdez, 9 against Money Mike Breeden, 3 against Rafa Garcia, and that's saying something. And not only is that the best part of his game, but that's the clearest path to victory here against Pete Rodriguez, who has primarily just looked like a striker up until this point, but we don't really know what his grappling looks like. And I say that because we haven't seen Pete Rodriguez have to grapple that much or defend much grappling because he's knocking guys dead early. This is down at 155 pounds. Pete Rodriguez has competed as high as light heavyweight, so the dude's dropped the tonnage, which is nice, and now he's down at 155, and if he can make the weight, he can make some noise. Last time out against Mike Jackson, he just brutalized Mike Jackson, got him out of there with relative ease. Before that, he lost to Jack Della Maddalena on short notice, I believe, in his UFC debut. No shame in that whatsoever. Jack Della Maddalena is a beast. Jack Della Maddalena is one of the best boxers and best strikers at 170 pounds right now, so no shame in Pete Rodriguez losing that fight, but I do think he has a very winnable fight here against Natan Levy. It's interesting because both guys' paths to victory are so clear here. If Natan Levy starts getting his takedowns going early, then he probably goes on to either win this fight by decision or by submission. But on the other side, and I don't say this about many, I barely say this ever, Pete Rodriguez could knock him out in 30 seconds. We even saw last time out for Natan Levy that he got stumbled early against Gerardo Valdez. It looked like it was going to be Goodnight Moon. And on top of the power, I love the training situation for Pete Rodriguez. Fighting out of the MMA lab, you have very high-level talent coming out of there, most notably Sean O'Malley right now. I like the line on Pete Rodriguez. I think it makes sense. I think that his win condition is that knockout. So if you're going to take Pete Rodriguez, you might as well take him by knockout. And if you use something like DraftKings Sportsbook or a sportsbook that offers the same kind of bet, you might as well take Pete Rodriguez by first round knockout. That makes the most sense to me. And then you could take Natan Levy if you want to hedge a little bit. But I do like Pete Rodriguez to win this fight. He is the pick for this fight. I think he's going to put those paws on him early, often, get him out of there in the first round. Give me Pete Rodriguez to win this fight by knockout. Our next fight is another scrap that we're looking at that I'm excited for. It's Charles Johnson fighting Cody Durden. Charles Johnson is very good. You love the hand speed. You like the movement. I like the kicks that come from Charles Johnson as well. He makes his UFC debut against Muhammad Mokaev, gets taken down 400 times. No shame in that though. Muhammad Mokaev is that guy. He wins a fight that he loses to Zolgas Zumagulov. Then he follows that up with an easy first round knockout over Jimmy Flick, and then he loses a fight that he wins against Ode Osborne. But I can't say that with too much conviction because he did give up takedowns at crucial points in the fight, and you just can't do that. But he's super talented, super athletic, and I think on his best day, he's a tough fight for almost anybody in the division. On the other side, you have Cody Durden, and if you looked up junkyard dog in the dictionary, this is what would pop up. Cody Durden fights with a ton of grit. He takes guys down, he beats guys up, he throws heavy on the feet, and he's really coming to fight every time. Like, he's not wasting any time in there. He makes his UFC debut, draws to Chris Gutierrez, which is impressive. Chris Gutierrez is damn good. He follows that up with a submission loss to Jimmy Flick, and you know what? I don't really hold that against him because Jimmy Flick does catch guys on the mat very often. Beats up on Aori Kilang, digs deep late into that fight, something that you really like to see, and that's where he tapped into that junkyard dog kind of mentality that we were talking about before. Just like Charles Johnson loses to Muhammad Mokaev, they got completely blanked in that fight, but Muhammad Mokaev is that dude. He follows that up with back-to-back wins where he looked impressive. Knockout over JP Bays, and then he turns in a dominant performance over Mata. So you really like what you see out of Cody Durden when it comes to the wrestling and it comes to just the stick-to-itiveness of that grappling as well, which makes it tough for me to choose this fight because you know what you're going to get out of Cody Durden. Pace, pressure, grappling. And with Charles Johnson, you really don't know what you're going to get. It's a lot of Jekyll and Hyde with Charles Johnson. You don't really know what version of him is going to show up. And it's not only that his performances are inconsistent fight to fight, but they're inconsistent round to round. His sense of urgency is unpredictable. And it seems like when he lets his hands go, he has unlimited success, like unrivaled success. But sometimes he lets minutes slip by. Sometimes his wrestling is more reactive than proactive. And there are a lot of things that I really don't like about Charles Johnson, but I do like him to win this fight because of his boxing. While Cody Durden's probably going to get Charles Johnson down, Charles Johnson is probably working back to his feet, and I don't think there's a huge submission threat on the side of Cody Durden when it comes to this fight. I think that Cody Durden's going to come out here, he's going to get some takedowns, but I do think Charles Johnson will do a decent job of defending the takedowns, and on top of that, I think he's going to throw a lot of strikes this week. I think he's going to put a lot out there. I think he's going to look better in the third round than Cody Durden does, and I think that cleaner, sharper technique, the uptick in volume as the fight goes on is really going to serve him well this week, and I think he grinds out a decision win. Truly a fight that can go either way. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a split decision here, but the pick for me in this fight is going to be Charles Johnson to win by decision. Next, we have a fight where Stephanie Egger is a massive favorite. That should raise all kinds of red flags for you already. She's fighting Russian Ronda Irina Alekseeva, and that's pretty cool. Apart from the breakdown real quick, I feel like Ronda Rousey gets a bad rap in MMA, and I don't understand it. Did she handle the loss to Holly Holm the best? No, but How would you handle it? You wouldn't know. Then she lost to Amanda Nunes. That only happens to everybody else. But we wouldn't have fighters like Stephanie Egger, and we for damn sure wouldn't have Irina Alekseeva if we didn't have some Ronda Rousey. So if you're a Ronda Rousey hater out there, show some damn respect. But she's fighting Stephanie Egger this week. She's got that judo background just like Stephanie Egger, but the difference in experience is what stands out to me the most here, and that's why I think Stephanie Egger's going to win this fight. Stephanie Egger is 5 fights into her UFC career. She's 8-3 overall. She beat Eileen Perez. She beat Jessica Rose Clark. She beat Shanna Young. She fought against Tracy Cortez. She fought against Mayra Buena Silva. Very high level stuff. She's getting takedowns in all of her fights. She's reversing position in some of her fights. She's really using her judo well, getting those trips going, getting arm bars going, and she's a finisher through and through. And I think that this is going to be a big shock for the Russian Ronda. She's going to come in there, she's going to look to clinch up with Stephanie Egger, and she's going to get tossed. Alekseeva's big, she's strong, she's physical, and she's going to come forward throwing a lot of heat on these punches. But again, once she clinches up, I think you can cancel Christmas. Stephanie Egger's going to hip toss her. She's going to get on top. She's going to work into her position, and she's going to find an armbar finish here. The line is way too wide here, something that you don't want to touch unless you want to get the prop for Stephanie Egger by submission, or if you take Stephanie Egger round 1, I think that makes a lot of sense. But overall, I think the play for this fight and the pick for this fight is going to be Stephanie Egger inside the distance. Next, we're looking at a fight with Brian Kelleher. He's fighting Journey Newson this week. Brian Kelleher is a UFC vet. He's kind of a journeyman. He's had some real mixed results in the UFC, but the skills are there. If he's at a grappling advantage, he takes full advantage of it. You see 6 takedowns here against Kevin Kroom, 3 against Domingo Pilardi. He's typically very active when it comes to his UFC fights. We haven't seen him in action for a while, though, after suffering back-to-back defeats to Mario Bautista and Umar Nurmagomedov, but he doesn't have to worry about the same skill set coming from Journey Newson. Journey Newson in the UFC, he has 5 fights. He has 3 losses, 1 no decision because it got overturned. So the only real win that he has that is stuck is against Fernie Garcia, who we kind of learned a lot about Fernie Garcia, especially in that fight. We picked Journey Newson to win that fight, but even in that fight, he was doing a lot of things you don't like to see. He was throwing a lot of kicks, that fresh air, essentially. He was able to get takedowns, but when he was going for takedowns and the lack of control that he was able to show largely, it's just not a good look. And I think that Brian Kelleher really has him beat everywhere. Journey Newson has that boxing background, but I don't think he's going to be able to put Brian Kelleher down. I think that Brian Kelleher is going to be able to close distance with those big hooks. He's going to find his takedowns, and I think he's just going to ride out position, or we're going to see Journey Newson shoot for a takedown and Brian Kelleher jump on a guillotine because he's one to do that. But at this point, yes, Brian Kelleher's UFC career has been up and down, but when you look at the amount of success just overall that he's had in the UFC versus that of Journey Newson, I think the much better fighter is the favored fighter here. Give me the favorite, give me the guy with more fights, higher level experience, give me Boom Kelleher to win this fight. I expect him to win by decision. And we'll finish up by looking at the 3rd UFC debut attempt of Hailey Cowan. She's fighting Jamey-Lyn Horth. I know. Who are you? There really isn't much to go off of for either of these women. I do think that Jamey-Lyn Horth is the better side here, the sharper play, and I am going to pick her to win, and that is largely because Hailey Cowan does not seem like she's all that good. And I mean that with as much respect as I can say it, but when you look at the wins that she has on her record, it's against embarrassingly low-level competition, and then some of the losses on her record are against very low-level competition. Her striking leaves a lot to be desired. Her grappling is not exactly elite, and I do think that in her UFC debut, because she is still debuting. A lot of us are saying, oh, the other girl's stepping in on short notice, she's debuting. It doesn't matter. Hailey Cowan still has not fought in the UFC. I don't care that she's fought in the Apex. This is still going to be her debut. Still a lot of nervous energy, and who knows, maybe the booking, the cancellation, the rebooking of this fight is not doing her a whole lot of favors. But I'll tell you right now, Hailey Cowan has gotten way too much airtime collectively on the YouTube space. I think we can all agree there. I'm tired of talking about Hailey Cowan. I think that Jamey-Lyn Horth is going to go in there, push a pace, knock her out sometime in the 2nd or 3rd round. Women's MMA, anything can happen, and I do think that Jamey-Lyn Horth is the sharper play here, considering that she's never lost. She's finishing all her fights. Yes, she's had a long layoff, but sometimes fighters come back just as good after a long layoff. We got somebody who's 5-0 making their debut against somebody who's 8-3 making their debut. The difference really isn't that much, and when you see the way that Hailey Cowan has lost some of these fights, especially against Kelly Clayton, I believe her name is, abysmal. So the pick for me in this fight is Jamey-Lyn Horth inside the distance. I think she's going to win by knockout. If you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you later in the week for the live show with Dan with Half the Battle, and when we go over our final picks, Draftkings plays, things of that nature. See ya.
Bye.